Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining. Today, we talk about food addiction and how it affects your health and your brain. Very briefly, my name is David Reinprecht. I'm a functional nutritionist, biohacker, master personal trainer, and a longevity expert. And my journey learning about nutrition and health started very early. I was 13 years old. That's the time when testosterone starts kicking in, you start liking girls. And I had a crush on one of my classmates, but I was way too shy to go up to her and say something. So for whatever reason, I decided to write a little, love note and giving it to her. But then when I wrote it, I was still too shy to give it to her. So make a long story short, I was hiding it under my desk, and my classmates, of course, exposed me and gave it to her. And at first, she was all happy. I saw her from a distance. Oh, who likes me? Who is it? Who is it? And when she found out it came from me, she came up to me with a piece of paper and she said, "Did you write this?" And I'm like, I'm all nervous. And she goes, "Well, if you did, I mean, come on. I mean, what do you think I'm going to go with you? Look at you, you fat." And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the beginning of my career. Because from that moment on, I wanted to learn everything about nutrition, fitness, bodybuilding, how to burn fat, to build muscles, to be healthy, and so on. I cannot tell you how many books I was reading about, nutrition and health, and pretty much every magazine that came out every month, I read them all. And then, of course, it was easy to pick a topic in college, which of course was nutrition. And then later on in life, I applied for foreign exchange student program to come to the United States at the university at CSUN in Northridge in LA. And 4 years later, I got approved. And 6 months later, I packed all my stuff and I started the journey here in America. And since then, I continued my education and functional medicine, functional nutrition, and in particular, because it's a booming business right now and it has become reality, is longevity. All right, so that's enough about me. So this lecture, we talk about also about the suicide rate in construction working. And I want to share briefly my own experience. I'm coming from a construction family myself. My grandpa, he died in his late 50s, because of his unhealthy lifestyle through a heart attack, drinking, smoking, working all day. And my dad, also a construction worker, also had a heart attack 12 years ago, but he was lucky. My mom found him in the backyard. And yeah, I was really lucky. And myself, I was working in construction, helping my dad or like on the side to make some extra money in the summer and stuff like that. So I witnessed this, firsthand. And I can tell you from my own experience, I've never, ever seen one single construction worker that eats healthy, didn't drink beer, or didn't drink cigarettes. I mean, smoking cigarettes. And the food they ate was all sandwiches, burgers, pizza, lasagna, and all that processed food. So, and I want to dive in deep today, why America is the sickest country in the world, and we also have, the sickest children, and we have a real pandemic in this country. And let's dive in. What can cause someone, for this topic, somebody commit suicide? In particular in construction working. So let's go through everything. We start with some numbers. All right, so the healthcare spending in the United States, the year is almost over, 2024. We spend $4.7 trillion per year on healthcare. If you boil it down, that's approximately $14,200 per person, in America, also per year. And the projection for 2028 is $7.5 trillion. To put that in perspective, that's 20% of our nation's GDP. And here on the next image on the left, you can see, from the 70s up to 2020, you can see that we're getting sicker and sicker, and we spend more money on healthcare. And if you think about it, we have the best doctors, we have the best technology. Every year we come out with new vaccines and new drugs, and but why do we get sicker year after year? Something is up here, and not many people talk about this. And here on the right, you can see the healthcare spending. Um, this. So as you can see, America by far has the most expensive healthcare system. And of course, we do spend the most money in healthcare. So the money has to come from somewhere, followed by Germany, Sweden, Canada, France, and so on. All right, chronic diseases. Here in America, 75% of people here in our nation have at least one chronic disease. That's 6 out of 10. 4 out of 10 have two or multiple chronic diseases. And the sad part is a lot of people are not even aware of it until it's too late. 70% of death in America is caused because of chronic diseases. Now, the leading cause of death in America is heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, chronic respiratory diseases, and the list goes on and on. And here on the left, I have some data, from 1997 to 2011. I mean, it's way worse now, but it shows you that arthritis is skyrocketing, and that's also because the sugar consumption has increased dramatically over the years. And high glycemic carbs and a lot of sugar causes inflammation in the joints, and you get the stiffness and the pain. Then followed by diabetes, which is skyrocketing. Diabetes in America, especially pre-diabetes, if I would have to guess, I think it's 7 out of 10. That's how bad it is. And again, most people are not aware of it. But to tell you, it's one of the easiest fix. If somebody is pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic, it is an easy fix, with lifestyle changes and nutrition. And then we have green cancer. And by the way, we have about 1.5 million new cases every year in cancer. And in red, we have stroke, in gray, we have heart attack, and so on. And as you can see, those numbers go up year after year. And the healthcare spending on chronic diseases, to put that in perspective, 90% of all cost we spend on chronic diseases. That's $4 trillion per year, which you can imagine is a huge financial burden on our healthcare system. And to make matters even worse, we also have, the sickest children. And, chronic conditions in children is so common. 1 in 9 have ADHD, or let's say they get diagnosed with ADHD. 50 million children are obese. And I don't mean like, just a little bit of overweight. No, I mean morbidly obese. And then child mortality and from 2020 also, went up. It also goes up year after year. In infant, 3.1%. Between 1 and 4, it went up by 12%, and between 5 and 14, it went up by 7%. So as you can see, something is not working, in this country. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of pressure from the FDA, from the government, because nobody wants to have so many sick children and not having an answer or, an idea on how to fix it. So the FDA approved statin drugs for children. Let me say something about this because this is, for me, absolutely insane. Cholesterol-lowering drugs in children will affect your brain development. And here's why. The brain is the fattest organ in the body. 60% of your brain is all fat. And 30% of that is cholesterol. So I think cholesterol might be important for healthy brain function, and in particular memory. And cholesterol is also needed for hormone production. So if you're a child around like 10 years old, and you go to puberty, that's where, the cholesterol is needed the most, for the hormone, to produce. So if you take a statin drug, you will interfere with the process. And also to give you an idea on how harmful those statin drugs are. Well, first of all, it's the most sold, drug in the United States. And there is more and more research coming out that they don't even work. And cholesterol is really not the main cause, for heart disease. But we get to that in a little bit. Statin drugs have one of the most common side effects is memory loss. I can give you a real life example for one of my patients. The doctor convinced him to get on cholesterol-lowering drugs like statins. And 2 weeks in, he was taking it, and he goes on his daily walk around the blocks, for a little, walk in the evening. And one day he went on a walk, but he never returned. And so the wife was all concerned because he never just leaves, something happened. So they called the cops, and the cops were driving around searching for him. And sure enough, 2 hours later, they found him. And he had complete memory loss, amnesia. So he didn't know his own name, he didn't know where he lives, and he couldn't even recognize his own wife. Luckily, after getting off those drugs, after a few days, the memory returned. But just to put that in perspective, it shows how important cholesterol is for the brain and for hormone production and many other things. Then the also approved Ozempic drugs, also known as semaglutide, for obese children. As you know, Ozempic is used, for adults, widely used for adults, especially in the last few years. But how does it work? What's happening when you take Ozempic? Ozempic is a peptide, an injectable peptide that slows down the gastric emptying, which means the food stays in your stomach for much longer. So the thing that's, not so good about it is, our digestive system is a long tube. It starts in the mouth, goes all the way through here, and stops at the anus, right? And so it's about 35 feet long, and it's like imagine it's like a conveyor belt. Every section is timed to do its job. Now, if you slow down the gastric emptying, that means the food stays in the stomach in the acid, the hydrochloric acid, for too long. And acid, can destroy some of the nutrients because, it's only meant to be in the stomach for a certain amount of time and then move on to the next section. But when you take Ozempic, a lot of these nutrients get lost because the acid just burns it off. And then, of course, you're going to automatically eat less because, the food stays in your stomach. Some of the side effects are that, you might have bad breath because of that acid, burning the food and stays in the stomach for longer. And also, the new study has shown for every pound of weight you lose, 1/3 is fat and 2/3 is muscles. So for somebody that wants to, lose like 10 or 20 or 30 pounds to, get on Ozempic, or somebody that's in the fitness industry wants to build muscles, I would not recommend it. However, if you 300-400 pounds, and there's no other way, sure, take it, at this stage, anything, helps. But for children, I would not recommend it. And if you Google Ozempic face, you can see those individuals that are on Ozempic for a long time, their face looks like, death. And that's because, not just the fat in your fat disappears, gets burned off, but also your muscles. And that is not always a healthy look. And then they also approved surgical options, such as the gastric bypass surgery for obese children. Well, it's a simple surgery where they make a small incision in your stomach, wrap a band around it, and shrink your stomach so that you automatically eat less. However, all this can be completely avoided by just educating the parents and the children about lifestyle and nutrition. All right, so this is our main topic here, construction workers' suicide rate. You're 10 times higher to commit suicide as a male construction worker versus the general population here in America. And that can be contributes to many things, but some of the major things are poor nutrition, substance abuse, which we already know, alcohol, painkillers, Adderall, some even take amphetamine because it's hard work, and cigarettes, and tons of beer, and also stress. Stress comes from everything has a timeline when it comes to construction. Everything has to be done at a certain time. So sometimes they have to work overtime. And job security, which I witnessed with my dad, and many times, if they didn't have a contract, they sent them home. And during the winter time in Austria, they actually stay home, during the winter time when it's really cold and it snows. And the government, supports them with minimum, wage. But yeah, that's how it at least is in Europe. So I guess you get a little bit more freedom there. And so 63%, you're more likely to die from suicide than the national average. And working days are getting lost in the industry each year due to mental issues. And again, in my experience, construction workers are like, men and they have a big ego and they're not asking for help. They're not gonna come to you, oh, I feel this way, feel that. Oh no, we are the tough guys, I'm not asking for help. And that is exactly the problem. And I know that because since I worked in construction myself, I've witnessed this, many, many times. Like my dad and all his friends, speaking of being stubborn, I used to tell him, many years ago that stop drinking all the sodas, with all the sugar, and he was eating, pork, schnitzel, every single day. The problem is, pork itself, I mean, it's not the best quality of meat, but whatever, has a lot of saturated fat. And on top of that, they fry it in vegetable oil, which causes inflammation. And that combined with sugar, it makes, it builds a buildup in the arteries. And then eventually, you get a heart attack. And that is exactly what happened to my dad. And he didn't listen, but after he survived the heart attack, now he's listening. And now he's, doing the diet I told him to. And now let's talk about, the chemicals in our food supply. I mean, how do we even get to all this? Why do we have such a, unhealthy nation? Well, that can be linked directly to our food. In America, we have preservatives, which are basically to increase the shelf life of the product. But there's an old saying, the longer the shelf life of the product, the shorter will be yours. And then we have artificial sweetener, which are linked to microbiome disruption. It messes up the gut microbiome, and that is directly linked to unhealthy brain function because the gut, the gut is the soil where the brain grows. And so having an unhealthy gut, you cannot have a fully functioning, healthy brain. And then we have coloring, colorants, which are used in all the processed food to brighten up the color because we know color attracts. We can see that in the animal kingdom, the bees, right? The brighter the color of the flower, the more the bees attract, to go there. And so especially with young adults and children, that coloring, helps a lot. They see like candy, they have bright color or ice cream, the kids want to go for it. And then we have emulsifiers, which is a group of chemicals we add to bind products. As an example, let's say we have a water-based product and an oil-based product. We know that oil and water doesn't really match well, right? It doesn't bind, but don't worry about it. We got plenty of chemicals to add. Then, it's not a big deal. That water and that oil, can perfectly bind. And here's something, crazy. Herbicide estrogen, which is widely used in America, but also in Europe. Estrogen, is a herbicide, pesticides, insecticides falls in that category. And they did a study on frogs when they get exposed to estrogen to see what happens. And shockingly, it medically castrated the male frogs. And in many cases, the male frog turned to a female frog. And here underneath, you can see the study, if you want to read about it more. So now on a greater scale, what do you think is going to happen if us humans get exposed to estrogen, years after years? I think we can come to a conclusion that it will affect our hormone levels, and I'm sure that also adds to transgenderism, these days because it's skyrocketing the last few years. There's many other chemicals that are involved, like plastic, and stuff like that. But herbicide, especially estrogen, has shown that it can turn male frogs to female frogs. So some of the stats in America, we have way over 10,000 chemicals and additives in our food supply, including pesticides, and they're all deemed to be safe by our regulatory agencies. But are they really? And 90% of our crops are genetically modified. Some of the most common GMO foods are corn, soybeans, canola, cotton, sugar beets, alfalfa, potatoes, apples, and the list goes on and on. And now you might say, okay, but they did the studies in America and is, deemed to be safe. Then why is it illegal in Europe? And why do you go to jail if you do that in Russia and other countries? All right, let me explain. So here in America, we did studies on GMO food with rats. The study went on for 3 months. So after they got exposed to the GMO food, there were no major side effects after 3 months. So boom, they're deemed to be safe, they're okay to use. However, the same study has been conducted in Europe, in France, and that study went on for 2 years. And after 9 to 12 months, their rats had uh, tumors growing the size of tennis balls. And so now you can see, what the difference is. Here in America, we have something that's called a single dose toxicity. If you get exposed to a toxin and you don't show side effects, it's deemed to be safe, and we add it to our, food chemicals. And that explains why we have over 10,000, and in Europe, there's less than 400. A lot of the chemicals that are approved and deemed to be safe here are considered toxic and dangerous and not for human consumption in Europe. And yeah, and so, I mean, that, shows you, why we have so many chemicals and GMO products in America and not anywhere else in the world. And also something good happened since 2022, the regulatory agencies finally passed something positive. They have to mention, genetically modified, or that they use a different word that's, not so common, bioengineered. So now you can look at the product on the label on the back, and it says bioengineered. It's a genetically modified product. All right, so here on the left, you can see we use MSG, on all our food because it's a taste enhancer. It makes everything taste better. They use it in restaurants, they use it in processed foods, and so on. However, it has shown that, it has side effects. As an example, me personally, if I get exposed to MSG, uh, every time in Vegas, if I go to a buffet and they use it there, trust me, a lot, I get, diarrhea, like every single time. And there's one restaurant, they use, I don't want to mention the name, but they use a lot of MSG on the food. It tastes so good. The food tastes so good, but every single time I went there, me and my girlfriend, back then, we always had diarrhea. And then artificial coloring, we already said, especially in candies and processed foods, it attracts, especially children, to buy it because it's so nice, the color. Especially red, red attracts, humans to eat. And then we have high fructose corn syrup. So when it comes to sugar, to explain it plain and simple, in my opinion, sugar is not for human consumption, period. And here's why. Let's go back, thousands of years. We didn't have no, sugar products, or candies or anything. The only sugary food we had was in fruits. And if you think about it, the only time fruits were growing was throughout the summer. And then towards the end of the summer, they were ripe, to harvest and to eat. In animal kingdom, we can see that animals, especially bears, eat berries like crazy to fatten themselves up because in the wintertime, there's way less food available. So it's about the survival of the fittest. And with us humans, it's, very similar. However, now we have sugar, 24/7. And if we compare sugar to high fructose corn syrup, it's even worse. Not only it comes from genetically modified corn, but it's sugar on steroids. And let me explain what's happening with your blood glucose when you eat something with sugar. But everything in longevity comes down to, having a low to medium healthy, blood glucose. That's when the body feels the best. You don't have any cravings, you don't have any mood swings, and the body functions 100%. But what if you eat ice cream or candy or something with high glycemic index? Boom, it shoots up. And it also hits the dopamine receptor, so you feel good, but everything that goes up eventually has to come down. And when it comes down, it crashes below base level. And that's when you get the cravings, and you cannot like hold back. Sometimes when the sugar drops too much, you can feel a little dizzy, a little bit numb, lips and tongue. And then when you eat something, oh, you feel better. Yeah, that, my friends, is sugar addiction. That is like 100% sign that you're addicted to food, just like a drug. There's also a famous study with rats with sugar and cocaine. It has shown that sugar is 8 times more addictive than cocaine. They had 20 mice locked up in a cage with sugar water, 20 mice locked up in a cage with cocaine water. They left them in there for a few days, and then they got them all together, and they, had both options. And guess what happened? Out of the 40 mice, only two went for the cocaine water. The rest went for the sugar water. Now, that should tell you something. Well, we talk about more about this topic in a little bit. And then you have potato chips, also packed with tons of chemicals, high sodium and trans fat. Then we have vegetable oil. When it comes to oil, because everybody's so afraid, they think that fat makes them fat, but it couldn't be further from the truth. You cannot live without, fatty acids. We have essential fatty acids, we have essential amino acids, but we don't have essential carbohydrates, which means you can have a good life without eating carbs. But when it comes to fat, there are some really healthy ones which we need. Fish oil, omega-3 fatty acids are essential, for brain health, lowering inflammation, and it even activates protein synthesis, which means it helps build muscles, and so on, right? Has a lot of benefits. Followed by, flaxseed oil, olive oil. We have coconut oil, which are the saturated fats, and then which you can cook with. And then we have butter, but make sure it's grass-fed butter or organic butter, also great to cook with. Now, those, are healthy fats. Avocado, yeah, like somewhere in between, but still okay. The unhealthy fats are canola oil, all those vegetable oils we use to cook with. That they are, if you would see on how they make them, you would never even touch it. When they process them, they become like a thick paste, and they have to add tons of chemicals to make it liquid. So the process alone is, horrible to watch. But we also know that too much of the omega-6 fatty acids can cause, inflammation. And inflammation is the first stepping stone, for many other chronic diseases, including faster aging, heart disease, low brain function, and so on. And then we have, aspartame and sucralose. Like we said, they can interfere with your gut microbiome, and unhealthy gut, unhealthy brain. All right, so the health risks of the food additives, the physical health. I mean, we know that they can cause cancer, hormone disruption, and cause obesity. The mental health, is also affected by that. It can cause depression, anxiety, ADHD symptoms, especially if you have the MTHFR gene mutation. Now, why did I add this one? Because 44% of our nation have this gene mutation. So that means there's a 50-50 chance that you or the person next to you has this gene mutation, which means if you do, you cannot convert some of the essential nutrients to its usable form. As an example, for better understanding, if I take the crude oil out of the ground and I put that in the gas tank, the car cannot recognize it. It cannot use it as energy. It needs to be refined, to gasoline. And that refinery, in humans is called methylation. And that methylation is controlled by the MTHFR gene. There's 5 genes that, control that. So everything that goes into your mouth doesn't get used in the form you eat it. It needs to be converted, methylated. And if you think about it, like a chicken or an apple, right? The body cannot recognize the chicken itself. It only recognizes the amino acids and some of the, vitamins and minerals that might be in there, right? But now imagine how much energy it takes to get that chicken to the tiniest, smallest particles, called amino acid. And a lot of that happens through methylation and our digestive system. However, the most important one for this topic is the folic acid. Folic acid, I'm sure you heard about it. If you go home and you have some supplements at home, there's a high chance that you have folic acid, in the supplement. However, folic acid is synthetic. You cannot find it anywhere in nature. It's made in the lab. The problem with that is if you have the gene mutation, you cannot convert folic acid to methylfolate because methylfolate is actually the form the body can use. Folic acid, it can't. If you don't have the gene mutation, don't worry about it. You can easily convert it. And so when the gene is broken, and you cannot make the conversion of some of those essential, vitamins, you have nutrient deficiency. But when it comes to folic acid, it's the most important nutrient for DNA methylation. So studies have shown that individuals that have the gene mutation, they cannot convert folic acid, and you eat a lot of that. And the accumulation of folic acid has shown it can cause, prostate cancer. And you also have nutrient deficiency, and it's affecting, your neurotransmitters in your brain. As an example, in a normal person, you're having a conversation, you're listening to me right now, right? And as you listen, you have thoughts coming in, ask maybe a question. Oh, that's good. I didn't know. All the thoughts are coming in. And then they also get dismantled. The next one comes in, dismantled, and so on, right? And that's how we can keep control and focus. However, if you have the gene mutation and you expose to folic acid, it goes like this. A thought comes in and it stays. You cannot dismantle it. Next thought comes in, can dismantle it. Next thought, next thought. Next thing you know, you have 10 thoughts, at the same time. You're all over the place and you cannot focus. And then, you listen to my conversation and half of what I'm saying, you get it all wrong because you just have too many things going on. And then here in America, we just give you an amphetamine like Adderall to speed up the nervous system so that you can process all the thoughts. But really what you have to happen is you have to calm down the brain, and relax. And if kids, as an example, get exposed to that folic acid and they have the gene mutation, many, many times it turns to ADHD. I have a real life example. One of my patients, the kid was 9 years old. Every time the kid was eating breakfast, cereal, and orange juice. And by the way, here in America, we spray folic acid on all our food supply, all the grains and stuff like that, right? Unless it's organic. And so we've been doing that since 1933. We've been spraying folic acid, on our food supply, especially on all the wheat products, on all the crops, to enrich, to enhance. However, if you have the gene mutation, it becomes a problem. And so the kid was eating the cereal and the orange juice, and every morning it turned to a wrestling match to get the kid in school. The kid was all over the place, couldn't focus. The mom had such a hard time to get the kid in school and everything. And also in school, the kid had problems. And then, sure enough, the doctor diagnosed the kid with ADHD. Here are the drugs, good luck and go home. Okay, so luckily one day they were running late and the kid didn't have breakfast. And the mom noticed, the kid is normal today. The kid is calm, um, doesn't put up a fight. It was easy to get the kid in school. What was different? Oh yeah, we didn't eat breakfast. That is weird. Make a long story short, they got referred to me. And sure enough, we did the gene test and the kid did have the gene broken. So what we had to do is we had to change, everything, throw out all the fortified foods, and we had to replace everything with organic because they're not sprayed with folic acid. And we had to give the kid, methylated supplements. Those are certain supplements that are already converted so that your gene doesn't have to make the conversion. And within less than 2 weeks, the kid was back to normal without using the drugs. And that happens, every single day. Some of the most common side effects with that is ADHD, ADD, autism, pregnancy loss, especially recurring pregnancy loss, high blood pressure, even if you're a healthy individual and you cannot explain why, and high homocysteine levels in your blood test is a great indicator. Depression, anxiety, and a lot of, mental fog, issues. And then we have gut health. The additives, that disrupt the microbiota and the inflammation cause inflammation. We already know that some of the chemicals, especially some of the artificial sweetener, can cause, mess up your microbiome and causes inflammation. And that directly, is affecting your brain. And then addiction. Yeah, we know that sugar, and fat and all the other chemicals with high processed salt and so on get you hooked. And I don't mean that, it literally gets you hooked. Every time you eat something with sugar or trans fat or, the chemical cocktail, you release a dopamine. The same dopamine, when you take drugs or, nicotine or alcohol, it's the feel-good hormone. And so when you eat that, you feel good, right? Oh, I'm in a good mood. And then 30 minutes later, you crash and like all moody. And that's why people that eat a lot of processed food or sugar, they have those crazy mood swings. And now you might ask yourself, okay, this is crazy. How do we get here? And why are we allowing this to happen? Well, here's the answer. In the 80s, tobacco companies like Archer Reynolds and Philip Morris bought some of the biggest processed food companies. One of them is called Kraft. And what happened was in the 80s, when the government was going after, tobacco industry and, exposing the truth about the health risk, they lost, a lot of money because people, a lot of people stopped smoking. And so they had to come up and expand to come up with an idea. So they bought those food companies and they took the same scientists that got you hooked on the chemical cocktail in cigarettes, applied the same principle to food. And let me tell you, they did a really good job. And the lobbying power, to put that in perspective, the food industry spends 5 times more on lobbying than the oil industry. Did you know that? And they paid off the FDA, the USDA, academic institution to overlook the harmful effects. We know that because some of the whistleblowers, like Casey Means, who's working with Kennedy right now, they have been exposing everything. He knows firsthand that they're paying off institutions like FDA, USDA, Howard professors, to overlook the harmful effects of certain chemicals and sugar and everything. And the result of this is our food pyramid of 2024. Now, can you tell me what is wrong with that food pyramid? I mean, just look at the top, everything in green, which they recommend to eat the most. Can you tell me what they all have in common? Or at least 99% of it? They're all high in sugar. Watermelon, even though it's naturally, it's high in sugar. Kale, they just threw it in there so that it doesn't look so bad. But kale, is not really that healthy. We used to think that it's a superfood, but they're high in oxalates, which are defense mechanisms, of the plants, and in particular kale, it starts crystallizing, and you get joint pains. Um, and also, if you give kale to a horse, the horse doesn't even eat it. I should tell you something. And then frosted mini wheats, unsweetened almond milk, again, folic acid, non-fatty frozen yogurt. Every time something says non-fat, the sugar content is high. The only flavoring we have is either fat or sugar. So if the sugar is high, the fat is low. If the fat is high, then the sugar is low. So to answer your question, because I'm sure you asked yourself this question, so what is healthier? Non-fat with more sugar or the opposite? No, get the regular one. Fat is not the enemy, but sugar is. Chocolate covered almonds. Again, it's chocolate, again, sugar, and almonds. If they just would have said just almonds, I would be okay. Orange juice with calcium, fortified, has folic acid. Honey nut Cheerios, again, all processed. This is advertising for the food companies. This is a perfect advertising for food companies. This is the result when the FDA, the USDA, and academic institution get paid off to overlook the issues. And then sweet potato fries in brown, right? Moderate sweet potato fries, chips. Again, why not sweet potatoes? Why, chips. And then millet and then egg substitute fried in vegetable oils. Why not real eggs and an egg substitute fried? Again, vegetable oils. We already know how harmful that is. Skinless chicken, okay, that's the only one I agree with, but that should be on top, if anything. Lucky Charms, again, cereal, whole wheat bread. It really depends. Some of them can be okay, but if it's not organic, and a lot of them have, sugar and have folic acid also. Then canned pineapple in heavy syrup. Again, sugar, sugar, sugar. Boiled or poached eggs, whole milk, M&Ms, mozzarella cheese, ice cream, and whole egg fried in butter. I mean, the whole thing does not make any freaking sense. And then cheese and then ground beef is at last. Well, when it comes to beef, it really depends. If it's pasture raised and if it's organic, and grass fed, that should be in the top. However, the way we treat the animals, with all the hormones and the environment, yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't eat anything if it's not grass-fed or pasture. All right, next, food and brain health. How does the food affect the brain? We already know the gut-brain axis. Remember we said the gut is the soil where the brain grows. You cannot have an unhealthy gut and a perfect functioning brain. It is impossible. In Chinese medicine, they have been recognizing that for a very long time. They don't treat, the brain or the gut separately. They treat it as one organ. And yeah, and some of those, all of those chemicals, especially artificial sweetener, can mess up your microbiome, and this will affect your brain. Then fluoride. We know that fluoride is known to lower IQ. Hitler was using that in Germany to, dumb down the masses, and it's also affecting your memory, and it also impacts your thyroid. And here in America, we have another pandemic, which is a thyroid pandemic. A lot of people have thyroid issues. I mean, there's many things, because, our food supply is so depleted, and some of the most important nutrients the thyroid needs, because the body makes about 80% T4, with the non-active form of the thyroid hormone. And then again, that's where the methylation comes in. Then it methylates, it converts it to T3, which is the active form. But there's some minerals needed for the conversion. And if those minerals are not given, you cannot make the conversion to the active form. And then as a result, you have low thyroid function. And then when you go to the doctor, they just give you a synthetic version of thyroid instead of just telling you, hey, you need some iodine, some zinc, some minerals, to fully function so that can make the conversion. Then we have sugar. Sugar causes mood swings, memory issues, depression, and it depletes minerals and vitamins. We already know about the sugar and the mood swings, right? Remember when sugar goes up and you feel good, dopamine release, and then you crash, and then you mood again. And that's why if you have a girlfriend at home that consumes a lot of sugar, and you ever ask yourself, how are you so moody? Like one minute you're great, and the other one you like, so weird. Well, maybe you should, look at the cabinet to see if some sugar in there. And memory issues. Yeah, sugar can cause memory issues. Like, did you know too much sugar in the blood is called diabetes. Too much sugar in the eye is called glaucoma. Too much sugar in the brain is called Alzheimer, dementia. And yeah, so like too much sugar can be traced back to many, many issues. And then depression. Yes, it can cause depression because anything that activates the dopamine, the rewarding hormone, it can be activated through nicotine, alcohol, drugs, painkillers, and food because of the chemicals, right? Anything that can activate your dopamine levels can cause depression, when you don't have access to it. And it also depletes minerals and vitamins. So we haven't talked about this one. Have you ever asked yourself why in the wintertime around Christmas so many people get sick? My mom used to say, well, of course, because it's getting cold outside. I'm like, oh, okay. Then every time I go in a cold plunge, then I should be like really sick, right? But it's actually quite the opposite. I'm feeling healthier and my body's getting better. So maybe it's not the cold. What is it then? Well, it is because people consume tons of sugar around the holidays. And what happens is every time you get exposed to sugar, your immune system, lowers, is affected by that for about 35% for several hours. And also, it depletes some of the minerals and vitamins. Some of the important minerals and vitamins the very same immune system needs to build to fight off, diseased microorganism get affected by that. It depletes it. It leaches onto like chromium, magnesium, zinc, and so on, and gets it out of the body, so the body cannot use it. And that's why in the wintertime around Christmas, when we eat a lot of sugar, people get sick. Let's say you ate a lot of sugar and around Christmas time and you go in the gym, right? You get exposed to a diseased microorganism, which by the way could be bacteria, viruses, whatever. But under normal circumstances, if your immune system is not suppressed because you haven't eaten any sugar, you wouldn't even notice it. The body would fight it off. However, when you consumed a lot of sugar and your immune system is depleted, now that disease microorganism can attack you and you get sick. And that's why in the wintertime, when around the holidays, people get sick. Then we have trans fat, which causes brain inflammation and reduces neuroplasticity. So inflammation in the brain, is affecting everything. The way you think, your mood, can cause depression, anxiety, and so on. And if you consume trans fat, which we have in chips and cookies and fried food, fried food is just the worst. If I would have the option to smoke a pack of cigarette or eat 3 days of fried food, I would choose the cigarettes. That's how bad it is. Have you heard that expression, you are what you eat? Have you ever wondered where that came from? That came from, fat. Every cell in your body is coated with a lipid layer, with a fatty layer, right? And depending on the fats you consume, your cells, use that fat and, get surrounded by it. So if you eat a lot of greasy, old trans fat, vegetable oils, and all that greasy oil, then over time, that can affect your cells on how to uptake, nutrients, because it's a, greasy fatty layer instead of like a healthy functioning fat. And that can also, have a negative effect on your ATP production. Your mitochondria that produces ATP, which basically gives you that energy. When they cannot make ATP, you're gonna feel tired, no energy, and you don't know, what's going on. That comes from eating those trans fats. And then having a plastic brain means the adaptability of the brain. Every time you learn a new task, you create new connections. And when you expose a lot of the trans fat and the brain's inflamed, you have a hard time, making those new connections. And the problem with that is, if you work, if you demand a job where you have to learn a lot of stuff, you have to memorize a lot of stuff, you will have a hard time, if you're exposed to those kind of fats. Next one is processed carbs. Again, processed carbs can come in many forms, and high glycemic carbs, with sugar, white potato, white bread, white pasta, all of them, are considered high glycemic carbs. And they all can affect, your dopamine. And of course, over time, your dopamine can be depleted because you always eat those processed foods and the dopamine gets always released. In the same way, I know it's a bad example, but in the same way, if you take a drug, the first time, oh, you feel great, a lot of dopamine release. But then if you take a second one, the third, and the fourth, or the next day, you're not going to get the same effect anymore. It's because your dopamine is depleted. And the same happens with food. Once the dopamine is depleted, you used to try to eat more and more, but you can't get to the same level. And that's when you get mood swings and depression, and you're just hating life. And then artificial sweetener, yeah, we already talked about this a few times. It messes up your microbiome, and that also can cause anxiety, depression, mood swings. High salt processed foods. You have probably noticed that every processed food is high in sodium. Now, when it comes to salt, it's the same as with fats, right? There's some really healthy ones and some really unhealthy ones. The healthy sodium, or let's say salt, that have 85 to 90% of minerals is Celtic salt. That's my number one. Baja salt, like Baja sea salt. And then, the pink salt and so on. These salts, if you consume, do not raise blood pressure. However, the processed salt, the sodium in all the processed food, right, retains water and increases blood pressure, because when the body retains more water, there's more pressure pushing on the arteries, because, all our arteries, it's a closed system. And when there's more pressure, on the arteries, of course, the pressure, goes up. And that's why with weight gain, your blood pressure also rises. And it causes also hormone imbalance and elevates stress hormone, the cortisol. If cortisol is important in the morning, it's the highest in the morning when we wake up, because that's why we have energy in the morning, because of the cortisol release. And then it tapers off, throughout the day. And then at night, we go to sleep, so it's at the lowest. And if we consume those processed salts or processed foods, your cortisol can be elevated high, throughout, up and down, up and down. And that can interfere with resting heart rate and then also, sleeping issues. And suicide risk. Yeah, and all that is linked to severe depression. Anything that affects your brain. Did you know that serotonin, which is the feel-good hormone, right? 90% of serotonin is made in the gut and only 10% in the brain. Now, what do you think is going to happen if you have a really unhealthy gut? Do you think your gut is going to produce, all the serotonin you need to feel good? No, it doesn't. And that's why gut health is so important. You know, gut, from the gut, that's the gate throughout the entire body. If your gut is not functioning 100%, or is, completely messed up because of, processed food, chemicals, and drugs and whatever, then you will have depression and mood swings and anxiety, 100%. If your gut cannot produce a healthy amount of serotonin, you will not be happy. And then when you get exposed to a stressful situation, I mean, life, that's life, right? You can get through divorce, or maybe get laid off a job, or you have too much work at the job, right? And you cannot handle it. Now, here's the difference. A healthy individual that eats whole foods, has healthy dopamine, has healthy serotonin, right? Versus an unhealthy person, let's say it's a construction worker that smokes cigarettes, drinks alcohol, eats a lot of tons of processed foods, and so on, right? Now, let's say both of them get exposed to the same stressor. Can you follow me? Same stressor. Let's say they both go through divorce and they both lost their job. But same situation, but you're going to have two different responses to that. That individual, their brain, the dopamine, the serotonin, and everything is affected by that because of the depletion from processed food and everything, will have a much, much harder time dealing with that issue than the person here on the left. I've never seen a person that eats healthy, has a healthy gut function, everything, being depressed. We all have our ups and downs, of course, but circumstances don't matter. The way you react to circumstances really matter. And you will have a different outcome with somebody that eats healthy. And I know that because I've been there, many times. I had some really, tough times in between. But my brain was able to handle that stress because I had a healthy, gut microbiome and, healthy dopamine and serotonin. And that is the difference between somebody getting exposed to the same stressor, but one can commit suicide because he doesn't know a way out, and the other one works through it and finds a way to get back on track. All right, now let's talk about our vulnerable population. So the youth, if you're already diagnosed with ADHD or depression or anxiety, and you eat all that processed food, then you just worsen the entire thing. And in adults, the same thing. If you already got diagnosed with anxiety, bipolar disorder, or even like you had suicide risk, and you get exposed to those chemicals, like we just talked about, you are most likely to commit suicide or do something unexpected, whatever that might be, than somebody that has a healthy function brain. All right, now the solution. What is the solution to all this? Well, I mean, I could talk about this for another hour, but in short, you have to make some, lifestyle changes and, change in nutrition and supplements. Some people can do it on their own, and some people need help, and that's where us nutritionists come into play. So, to give you a few tips, let's talk about fasting. Why is fasting so important? We have intermittent fasting, we have, 24-hour fasting. There's many, fasting, methods you can apply. However, what is fasting? let's let's look at it this way. In every religious text, right? In the Bible, in all the Quran, all the religious texts, they all talk about fasting, correct? But back then, we didn't have any idea that it might be healthy. If anything, I thought this is like unhealthy, the suffering, of refraining from food. However, now we have all the studies and people write books about it, and it's fascinating how healthy it is. And it's fascinating that they knew that back then. All right, so imagine you have a flu. You're sick at home, you don't feel good, you have a flu. Think about it. Were you ever hungry when you had the flu? No, right? Because the ghrelin hormone that reminds you, hey, to eat is shut off or at least suppressed. So you're not hungry. And the reason why is because the body needs all that energy to heal. The biggest stressor we put on our body every single day is eating, right? Like we said before, imagine an apple, a big apple. The body cannot use that apple in this form. It needs to be converted, right, to its usable form. There's some vitamins, there's some minerals, and tons of glucose, right? And it takes a lot of energy to get that apple to those tiny microscopic, particles we can't even see with our naked eye. Now imagine you were sick and you would force feed yourself and you would eat. You will take that energy that's responsible for healing you away, and the body is forced to digest the food. And that's why it's already built in. You're not hungry, when you're sick. And my mom always tried to force feed me. Oh, eat some chicken soup, you get healthier quicker. Yeah, I know she meant it well, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Always listen to your body. And also when you fast, when you do exercise in a fasted state, I always, do cardio in a fasted state because then the body's forced to use fat as fuel right away. The minute you drink coffee in the morning with a little bit of sugar, it spikes your blood glucose and it kicks you out of the fast. And so what that means is, when you do cardio and you eat something prior, then you just burn off the food you just ate and you're back to where you were before you eat breakfast. So it's way more efficient to do cardio on an empty stomach because then the body's forced to use fat as fuel because there's nothing else here. The minute the body has access to glucose, it will always use glucose first. That's its first and favorite, energy source. But if that's not here, then the body is forced to use fat as fuel. Fat is nothing else than stored energy. It's a battery we carry with us, every day. And only when there's an extra, energy we need and you haven't eaten, enough calories, then the body takes that extra energy from the fat to burn. Or if you fast, then the entire time the body uses the fat and burn it as energy. And that's another, great thing about fasting. And the body can rejuvenate and heal. Even like in cancer treatments, we do a lot of fasting because we're cutting off the food supply, to the cell. The cancer is nothing else than a cell that, grows 8 times faster than a regular cell, and it loves sugar and some of the amino acids such as glutamine. So like any other cell, even a muscle cell, right? If you don't eat, it starts shrinking. So the same with the cancer cell. If you take the food away for the cancer cell to grow, it will shrink. And I've done many times with some patients, and it works pretty well. And then eat whole foods, organic, pasteurized, grass-fed. I mean, these are a must these days. And I do understand that being healthy these days is a little bit more expensive than, unhealthy. But trust me when I tell you, um, in the long run, spending that extra few dollars on organic, pasture-raised food, you will be grateful because sooner or later, if you eat all the processed food, you will get sick. You will have mental issues. You will have a chronic disease or multiple chronic diseases, 100%. So in the long run, you save way more money because otherwise you just end up, paying big pharma. And then supplements. If we would have this discussion here 50 years ago, I wouldn't even mention supplements. You know why? Because 50 years ago, the amount of vitamins and minerals apple or any fruit had, is 55% less today. And that's because of the depletion of the soil. Every time our soil gets exposed to those pesticides and insecticides, it kills the bacteria in the soil, which is a must, for healthy plant growth, with all the vitamins and minerals. And so we don't have that no more these days, unless you have your own garden, far away. But generally speaking, no. And that's why it's important to add some supplements these days. But when it comes to supplements, let me tell you, it's the same with like healthy fats, unhealthy fats, right? And the same with salt. Supplements, there's some really bad ones and some really good ones. The supplements you need. Well, first of all, you can do a genetic test, which we also do, to determine to see which vitamins and minerals your body can process. Or, if you have a gene mutation and you need certain methylated, supplements, if you want to be very exact. However, if you don't, then generally speaking, you need methylated supplements that are already converted. So you take, the extra workload away from the body to make the conversion because they're already converted. And also vitamins that come from, real fruits, not synthetic ones. As an example, I give you a great example. B12. B12 you can find in energy drinks. I mean, it's everywhere, right? And it's essential for the body. However, there's two types of B12. When you go home, I challenge you, look at your container to see what it says. Does it say B12 cyanocobalamin or does it say B12 methylcobalamin? There's a big difference. Methylcobalamin is the one you want. That's the one that's already methylated, and that's the healthy one. Cyanocobalamin is made out of cyanide. The same cyanide we use for chemical weapons, yes, but they're saying that it's a such small amount that it doesn't affect the body in a harmful way. But if I will tell you on how to make them, in the sewage, right? When the water comes in, and you have the dirt, gray, brown, whatever foam on top. Yeah, this is how they process, B12. This is your B12 you consume. They scratch off the surface of that foam, turn it into powder, clean it and stuff. And it's so cheap, almost costs nothing. And that's why you see cyanocobalamin a lot, on those vitamins. Just to give you one example out of many. That's what's important to know which supplements to take. And then, lifestyle adjustments, spend time in the sun for vitamin D and healthy methylation. We already know that sun makes you feel good. It makes you happy, right? Like when you go to the beach and then you come home, oh, you feel so relaxed, you feel great. Well, that's because the sun has many positive effects on the body. The only negative effects it has when you get sunburned, every single day. It all comes down to the yin and yang, right? You have the perfect amount of certain stressors, to be healthy. If it's too much, it can be harmful, even though it's something healthy. It's the same with supplements with food. And so the methylation in the body, we already know, it's basically for all the functions in the body. It turns genes on and off and regulates all the traffic. I think a simple analogy is imagine we have millions of traffic lights in our body, and they regulate the traffic, all the functions in the body, right? Such as detoxing, hormone production, and so on. And when the traffic light, works, it doesn't matter how many cars are at the intersection, it can easily, regulate the traffic. But what happens if green comes up on both sides? Boom, it crashes and slows everything down. And in the human body, when the methylation is not working or is very inefficient, then all the functions in your body slow down and you don't feel good, you get sick, you age quicker, and so on. And when you go in the sun, it helps the methylation. And there's also supplements and food, of course, for that too. And then, do some cardio. It's healthy for your heart. Be out of breath, weightlifting, strength training, which is good for bone density and muscles. And I'll do some fitness, play some pickleball, some tennis. It's also great for, social connections. And, if you have a stressful job or if you feel stressed, I mean, you can do some, meditation or yoga, or you can adapt a breathing technique, right? Like Wim Hof. He shows it that 30 times in and out, but make sure that you sit down because you can get really dizzy when you do that. There's an old saying, the more oxygen you have in the body, the presence of oxygen is the absence of disease. And that is so true because diseased microorganisms, including cancer and everything, they hate oxygen. They cannot, survive in an oxygenated area. They love a hypoxic area. However, the healthy, bacteria, they love oxygen. They proliferate in oxygen, and that's why, as an example, when you do a mouthwash, right? When you do a mouthwash with alcohol, right, then you kill all of them, the good and the bad ones. But if you mouthwash with hydrogen peroxide, which is nothing else, it just oxygenates your tissue. That's where you start foaming. You kill off the bad ones because they don't like oxygen, but the good ones, they survive. And so, I mean, there's many examples I can give you, but overall, there is a way out. There's always a way out. Just people need to ask for help, And I know, like I said before, especially in construction, those are real men. Like my grandma always told me, boys don't cry, boys don't show pain. Yeah, and later on in life, those boys become men, and then they work on construction. Then they get exposed to all these environmental factors, right? And the food, the chemicals, and it's all affecting our gut and our brain. And like I said before, the difference between somebody that has a healthy gut and healthy brain and an unhealthy, they can handle the stress and find a way out. But these people here do not. And if they don't ask for help, they will commit suicide or do something else that's, not so good. And that is the difference, between somebody committing suicide and somebody sticking in and find a way out. All right. I hope this information was helpful for you. If you have any questions, in the comment section, let me know. And you can also reach out to me, arizonanutritionist.com. You can get more information. Also here in my YouTube channel, you can watch many other videos with important information. You can also set up a free consultation. If you just go to my website, go to the contact page, contact me, we set up a meeting, and we can talk about it. Thank you for watching.